as you're getting that up, by way of introduction, so on the project, so Aunty Vickey, on the project for us, she was both researcher as well as teacher. So one of the first things we did was for the Department of Employment, we actually asked Aunty Vickey to come in and to give her version of cultural competency training. It usually involves her own personal story, which is pretty powerful. And then from there, she also led research for us in South Australia, and also helped us recruit in Mt Druitt.
And we didn't have recruitment in South Australia at that time.
So with that, turn it over to Aunty Vickey.
Hi guys. Where do I start? It was a sunny day in 1965. Too far back, right? So I was born on the 7th of February 1965, and I'm a Alawa and Murray woman. And if we had the Aboriginal map up, I would show you where my lands are, which were up the top. I was removed from my mother due to white policy when I was 18 months old, and brought to Adelaide and grew up in Adelaide from then on in a non-Aboriginal family. So my father, who was a white man, brought me back to his white wife, and I grew up in Adelaide. And my mother, God bless her, didn't have a clue about culture. But, you know, I learned a lot of my Aboriginal culture from kids in the neighbourhood, and that I went to school. We had a high population of Aboriginal children. And so, long story short, I guess, I really didn't even find out about a lot of my stuff. I was never denied my culture. I always knew who my mother was and where my family were, and they always kept an eye on me from afar. And if you hear people talk about the Aboriginal grapevine, my family was in the Territory and 3,000 odd kilometres away, and they knew every move I made as a young person growing up. I was lucky enough to return home for the first time. I will be 53 this February, and I returned home for my 50th birthday with my two boys and my daughter-in-law, and I get all a bit teary, sorry. And and even though I grew up in a community, Aboriginal community in Adelaide, they didn't look like me, they didn't talk like me, they didn't act like me. And going home, finding that true sense of belonging, because they look like me, they talk like me, they act like me. Anyway, so I've worked in many government organisations, and worked at the ABC, and worked in health many years, and worked in a program called Family by Family, created by TACSI as an Aboriginal community connector. So I've done a lot of practice work, I guess. And so my role, I guess, in this was about how we can do lots of things and engage Aboriginal families in processes that we're doing in co-design. And, a lot of the insights that we found was, about building relationships. And it takes a lot longer to be able to do that with Aboriginal families because of so much mistrust from white policies of the past. It's a bit like Michelle was saying earlier, it's the Department of Employment, and as soon as they hear the word department, they go, no, don't want anything to do with it. So, I think the relationship building stage is a massive, massive thing that you have to do, and that might mean that you have to go out for I'm a smoker, 20 smokes under a tree just to chat to someone and being in a safe space with them, because we talk about cultural safety, and what I actually found, even myself, when I actually went into some of the job actives, were really culturally unsafe. They didn't have a flag up, the buildings were really white, sterile places, and you didn't feel welcome. And one of the quotes was from one of the Aboriginal women we spoke to was, I walked into the job active and it was like walking into a morgue, and I walked straight back out again because of just not even having a flag or having any identity in the room to be able to say, this is a safe space for me to be able to come in. This is what, I'm welcome because there's a flag there. I'm really not really sure what else to talk about. Yeah, we just
talk to us about the use of the term vulnerable.
Yeah, so language is a massive thing, and vulnerable is not a really good term, I guess. And we, in family by family, we change that language, and I can't even remember what the true language is now.
So we talk about in family by family. We talk about families who have been through difficult times.
Yeah, so they're going through a difficult time at the moment, not necessarily vulnerable. I was trying to look up a different word for the word vulnerable, which is, they were way worse, the other words. And I was like, what, really? Yeah, language is a massive thing, and I don't like using the word Indigenous, even though I hear it all the time, and I know in different states in Australia and in the territories, people are quite happy to be called Indigenous. To me, it's just a white word that was made up by the government. When I talk about Aboriginal, I say the meaning of Aboriginal is belonging to, so you belong to an area and the land and everything around it. Indigenous is coming from, so you're an indigenous species. That word Indigenous also does go back to before 1967, before the referendum, and Aboriginal people were classified as fauna. And so when you use the word Indigenous, it takes me back to when I was removed and I was nothing but a rabbit or a dog or a dingo or whatever. I wasn't a citizen, I wasn't anything. So language is a massive thing, and I often talk about don't be scared of Aboriginal people. A lot of people seem to be really scared when they go into the space of being able to talk to an Aboriginal person. We're just people, like everyone else. Go and have a yarn, They might not want to meet you in a sterile building. They might want to meet you out in the tree under the park, under the tree, just sitting on the ground having a coffee. But they're more than likely quite willing to tell their story in a place that's safe for them to be able to do that. I don't know, what else? Come on, quick, throw me things.
Often talk to us about what it means to sit in our white privilege.
Yeah, see, and white privilege is a massive part of, and I see it all the time still, even as a 53-year-old woman, where you have to think about your white privilege. So the things that you can do that I can't actually do. And there's lots of cultural respect training around people's white privilege, but having an understanding of that. So when we're going out and talking to vulnerable groups, especially when it comes to Aboriginal communities, we're overrepresented anyway, but then you come in and go, we know what's best for you, or we can do this. And the realism is that it's not that for them. And so just having a yarn to them, don't make it feel like a process. We heard lots of feedback from a lot of the job seekers around it seems like a tick and flick. And I've seen a lot of programs that have started running in my lifetime, have started running, and they've been pilot programs, and they've gone, yeah, we've ticked and flicked this, but the program's actually not gone anywhere. And so as designers or as co-designers and going through this process, you hope that eventually we'll be out of jobs, because we'll be able to do this. And so it's that just having a conversation with people and not making it feel like a process. And that you do go and you go back again and say, hey, we actually listened to what you said. We heard this, and this. Is that correct? Yes, no. And then you reiterate what you're doing to be able to then go, well, we now listen to you again. Is this right? I always one of my major things when I started come and work for TACSI, and I was thinking, well, hopefully reconciliation's my main field. So I think, one day, and I think, geez, just imagine when Captain Cook first landed and he met the Aboriginal people and they said, hey, let's co-design this country. What a difference it would be. But no, I'm standing here in 2017 and we're still coming up against struggles and, and we're still fighting and we're still doing all this stuff. But, it's nice to be able to dream. I don't know what else you want me to say. I don't know.
You also had stories. You had wound up unemployed once, and you had a story that compared your experience of being unemployed with what people are experiencing today, even though it was under a different contract.
Yeah, so about going in there and being left. And I'm quite literate, computer literate, read. And it was a really hard process on the way that they treat, and I'm assuming it's probably the same for non-Aboriginal people as well, but for mainly Aboriginal people, not having any Aboriginal staff. Sitting in, I don't know if you've ever been into job actives, or into the, work centres, but you sit and there's petitions and everyone can hear the conversations that are happening around you. In a community, Aboriginal community, it's really small. I know that if I'm going to be sitting there and I'm hearing another conversation, that this is private stuff that doesn't need to be in the community. I just had a really quite bad experience with, and in the end I just gave up and found my own job. So, and I went off and was a cleaner, because I always said to my boys when they were growing up, if I have to dig a hole in the road to earn money to put a roof over your head and food in your tummy, then that's what I'll do. So in the end, they were just pointless. They were just there collecting whatever money they needed to collect, because I ticked a little thing saying I was an ATSI person. I had something else in my head then. I was talking about that. We're talking about Michelle talking about walking in both worlds, and it's really, really hard for Aboriginal people to be able to walk in the white man's world and do the jobs and expect to be at work from 9 to 5 or shift work or whatever job you have when you have community commitments, and depending on your standing in the community, and community always comes first. And so that was the thing we were trying to do with the employers, was give them an understanding of that they're not just being lazy and not coming to work. They, have a commitment, and their family commitment may be that they have to get all the kids ready for school in the morning. It could be that they are working for a government organisation, and they're walking down the street and they have to try and separate their community commitment of being able to help someone. And in another project that I worked on, it was as simple as policy said you can't have anyone in your car. You got a work car, you can't have anyone in it unless it's a client. Community commitment says if you see Auntie walking up the hill and it's 45 degrees, you stop and pick them up and you drop them where they need to go. And it's being able to understand that stuff, that what you do in community is really going to be conflicting with what the laws are, or what the rules are within your workplace. I don't know. I'm over. I'm out.
Great. So I've got some questions, but because we don't have a lot of time, I thought